Hello, everybody. My name is Richard C. Wilson, and I'm here today doing this interview with Eli and Rahul, who are from a due diligence background check firm, and they've done thousands of due diligence reports for companies from private equity, commercial real estate, operating businesses, global, domestic. And the last time I checked with them, they had done a couple thousand reports in a single month. And so I just thought that adding this interview as part of our investor club community could shine a lot of light and add a lot of insights to the conversation. We're specifically recording this for our due diligence deep dive workshop, but it's also going to be available probably through perhaps our podcast or member portals or an investor portal. And welcome, Eli, and welcome, Rahul. Appreciate you being here today.
No, thank you so much. Great to be here.
Thanks a lot, Richard. Thanks. Great to be here too.
Sure. So just to start out with, what are 2 to 4 fundamentals and pillars of due diligence that you could share with us based on your experience and just doing due diligence full time? Because a lot of our members are investment firm principals, or they're investors and they're still running their business, or they had an exit and they don't have the deep knowledge you guys have in due diligence. So what are some of those fundamentals?
Yeah, I think the two that I would really emphasize are, one, getting started early, and the second to kind of play off that is get a full understanding of what you need right off the bat. I think that's kind of where a lot of firms that are successful in the due diligence process, they do a lot of the, well, they let us do a lot of the heavy work at the front end to kind of figure out what they need, and to approach it with whatever provider you're using as a consultative exercise. Because a lot of jurisdictions, the difference between jurisdictions really plays into, what level of due diligence you want, what information is available, and how we generally approach it. And also, it helps us at the start to have the context to help with whatever you're dealing with. So if you're looking at partners in Asia, it's a lot different than looking at partners in Europe. And if you're looking at partners in Europe, the data availability is a lot different than looking at partners here in the US or anywhere else in North America. So getting started early and working with your provider to get their take on, what you need is probably the 2 pillars that I would emphasize the most. I know there's a lot of programmatic due diligence that is convenient, that you can say, oh, for this we need a level 1, for this we need a level 2, or whatever the scopes are called. But based on your individual firm's risk appetite, I would just say work with your partner early and often, because you're going to get the product you need in the time frame that you need it, more often than not. If you start late, or if you don't do that, then there's going to be a lot of back and forth. There's going to be a lot of last minute kind of rushing, and that'll definitely affect the quality of the product that you're getting.
Right. And I know that some deals that move very quickly could be, 3 to 8 weeks, but a lot of serious size investments are 3 to 5 months or 3 to 9 months. When is early and when is enough time to do at least a moderate level of due diligence?
Yeah, I think that I think starting earlier gives you a chance to kind of do a lower level of due diligence, maybe a lower scope is a better word to say. And what that allows you to do is identify anything that might trip up the transaction pretty early in the process. And then if there is information that is kind of a red flag or maybe a yellow flag, let's say, it'll give you enough time to do a deeper dive to figure out what's the real context behind that information, so that you guys, when you're looking at a partner or a transaction, have the ability to ask the right questions. Instead of just, at the 11th hour, something coming up and saying, what are we going to do about this?
Right.
So, we had an experience with a client who they started their process pretty early, and they were looking into a medical tech or medical device manufacturer. And we found out pretty early in the process that this particular provider was fined by local authorities for engaging in a kickback scheme. And that happened about 7 to 8 years ago. So, they asked the question, so what do we do about this, right? And they asked the question, well, what do people in the industry think about them? Do people still do business with them? And that got the ball rolling on our end, saying, okay, look, we can look into the public records. We all know this happened. It's out there. Official sources say it's out there, but you're right. What are people in the industry saying? And that gave us a great lead time to talk to, our source network on the ground that's familiar with the industry, just to give them better answers into, do you guys think that this provider is still engaging in kickback schemes? Do you engage in business with them? Would you engage in business with them? And what's kind of the insider information that you're hearing about them? Because you're investing in this business, and if their buyers are unwilling to buy from them because of these concerns, then that's going to affect the business. So I think that's a good real world example. They started the process probably 2 months before closing on the transaction, and they gave us a call probably 2 weeks into that 2 months. So we had a month and a half, and it was more than enough time for us to do what we needed to do to help them out.
Right. I've seen many times where if the other party brings up and say, hey, as you go through this, you're probably going to uncover this thing because it's public, and just so you know, this is what happened. Here's how we addressed it. And if you proactively point that out versus having to find it through a team like yourselves, and it doesn't seem like you were trying to hide it or not be upfront or honest about it. And that obviously builds trust versus when you guys work with a client and then some huge black mark gets uncovered. I'm sure sometimes it just simply kills the deal, or they just kind of disconnect and go the other direction, right?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I think that any sort of adverse info that comes out like that, it's usually not the information itself that'll kill a deal, but it'll be the failure of the other party to disclose it that kills any trust between them, right?
Right.
Because these red flags are red flags. They're generally not smoking guns that kill a deal. They basically are a pathway to figure out, what's the context behind them, and can we move forward from this, right? But if they don't tell you at all and you come across it, then that trust gets broken. I think that's kind of where starting earlier gives you the ability to ask those questions.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And Eli, what size of a deal or investment makes doing a background check or getting a due diligence report on somebody viable or worthwhile? I mean, some people put $25,000 here, $50,000 there. Other people have minimums that are much higher, where it's obviously making a lot of sense, or it's at $250,000 or $1 million plus, et cetera. But what do you guys see as kind of your minimum level deal size where it's worthwhile to get this type of work done?
Sure, great question. So I wouldn't say it's as much about the deal size as it is the risk appetite of the investor. So we understand that no two deals, no two firms are going to be the same, and so we have a very wide array of scopes that can even be customized if need be to really cover the whole gambit, right? So we do everything from a summer associate employment search that's going to be pretty much as light as it gets in most cases, all the way through to SPAC and IPO level due diligence, right? That Rahul's team handles, and that's pretty much as comprehensive as the scopes will ever need to be in most cases. And so, like Rahul mentioned as well before, that we have the capabilities to, if any adverse information comes up, go through to our source network and put boots on the ground, get real, human intelligence going. But I'd say, yeah, it's really more about what the risk appetite is than actual size of the deal.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. And sometimes it might even be, I guess to your point, a personnel thing that has a broader scope or impact, and it's not necessarily due diligence on a deal, but a key person that you're hiring, or whether the CFO should come with the company or stay behind, et cetera. So it's not always due diligence on a deal package. Could be personnel, or it could be IP, or something else related to real estate that is different than just the size of the deal, I guess is part of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, exactly. We've seen common practice be, run diligence on this entity or these entities, and as well as, the managing principals.
Right. Okay. And what's the number one most counterintuitive lesson that you've learned by conducting a couple thousand due diligence reports a month that you could share with those listening who maybe have only paid for or done 5 in their whole life? Like what's not obvious to someone who's kind of on the outside of just 100% focused on doing due diligence all the time?
Sure. So one thing that I've found personally is that some higher end deals that we've seen having a key person either in the spot of president, CEO, or chairman of the board that is high profile, high net worth individual that's really been in the media, in the public sphere quite a bit, and you can find a great deal about them online. I would have thought that maybe most firms wouldn't be interested in the level 2 due diligence, the source inquiries, where we're speaking to people about reputational components, et cetera, that it wouldn't be as necessary for someone who's in the public sphere to that degree. But to my surprise, they've really dove into those certain scenarios with a lot more vigor than I would have expected. Just because, sure, you can read all you want online, but actually getting boots on the ground and dealing with former colleagues, former competitors, industry experts about what do they like to deal with, how easy or difficult are they to sit with at the table and go through things. These are key topics that really need to be flushed out before an investor moves through the transaction.
Yeah, interesting. We acquired commercialrealestate.com last year for about $500,000, and during that process, we asked for references on our own account without going through the potential investor, and found out that somebody was highly litigious, and we ended up not having them as part of that deal, even though they wanted to be part of it, because of that information, which came from that exact type of source that you're talking about. And this was like a highly public real estate professional who's very well known. You can find 500 things about him online, but we heard from 2 different sources about all of the lawsuit issues in both directions that they have had in the past, and decided to step away. So I can definitely relate to that for sure. Anything else counterintuitive from either of you that you'd want to make sure and mention, just because I'm sure your insights run pretty deep in this area?
Yeah, sure, I can go. So, I've been in this industry for about 10 years, and I think the thing that I learned pretty early on is that, and that's counterintuitive, is sort of the absence of absence of findings is actually a finding in itself. So, there's a lot of our clients that I've had in the past 10 years do a lot of programmatic due diligence, meaning, due diligence is triggered by some event that they're looking to get past. And a lot of times the reports are what we like industry call blank. There's no adverse information, right? We identify and we do all the things that you want us to do, but we didn't find any adverse info. And when you're first starting off in this industry, you want to find stuff. People that come into this industry as researchers are naturally curious. They have an investigative mindset. Right. So, you have this intuition via, I have to find something on Richard Wilson. I have to find something. And there's most likely there's going to be nothing on most people that are in business transactions in terms of red flags. But that, that serves as kind of, there's 2 ways where that serves as a finding in itself. One is it gives our clients peace of mind to go through with the business decision, right? There's nothing adverse, and there's nothing noteworthy. So you have the green light to go ahead. And the other way is, we've had experiences where our client is skeptical about a transaction, an entity or people that they're doing business with in a jurisdiction that they might not be familiar with or first time. And these people are making boasts and claims that, they can do this and that and this and that, and they have these capabilities. And then we do our research and figure out that, hey, no one's ever heard of these guys, or there's nothing in the public records that indicates that they have these capabilities. And so the absence of those findings is actually another finding in itself. It's like, okay, well, we really have to go and do some real digging here. And this comes up a lot in jurisdictions. I think the most famous case in the last 15 years is a lot of those shell companies in China, where banks are investing in like IPOs, but the address of the factory that they gave their underwriters or their partners was actually an empty field somewhere. And that's kind of when we find that we're like, well, there's no factory or there's nothing registered at this address, and any satellite imagery we can find in the last 5 years has nothing but farmland there. That's, we're not finding anything adverse. We're not finding anything noteworthy, but that in itself really should raise some questions about the investment that they were getting into.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great insight. And sometimes we see it on a very basic level when we're trying to check somebody out. We had someone that wanted to partner with us for some of our investor relations clients, and they claimed to have 13 years experience and all these capabilities and this big team. And then their LinkedIn profile, they had no image on the profile. Their website, they had no bio for themselves, and their name wasn't even on their own website. No team shown on the website. And we asked them, we said, well, do you have a deck or materials? Like, who's on your team? What's your background? Just basic information. and they wouldn't tell us. Yeah, they said they have this 13-year track record of working with all these clients. And my team was really pushing me to work with them because it would have been a powerful solution if it was real. And I said, guys, like, I just don't have a good feeling with this. It just seems like a unicorn, utopia type thing. And like, if it was real, they would show off the depth of their high quality team, or they would at least show the bio of the founder, if nothing else, at least in a deck, if not on a website. So with family offices, I know many people are very private about being wealthy, especially in countries outside of the US. But I think if you're an operating business or an investment company, then at least within your pitch deck or teaser, you have to be able to show who's on the team. Otherwise, you'll never build trust. And, we later heard of someone going to work for that firm and they ended up quitting a month later just because of things being, not what they were claiming to be publicly. So I think that's something that we've only seen superficially, but I'm sure what you're saying, I guess, is that when you do a deeper dive and a real due diligence process on someone, if you can't find them associated with any LLCs or any government listings or anything anywhere, it's like, what have they been doing the last 20 years? If they didn't pop up somewhere, then if they've just been sitting in a cubicle at some big corporation and haven't done anything as a business owner, I think that's something pretty informative if someone's looking to back someone who's claiming a big track record as a CEO or an investment principal, right?
Yeah, no, and that's totally true. And I think the second one kind of flows off that a little bit, is that online doesn't have an equal meaning everywhere in the world. And I think that's even more true now than it might have been 10 years ago, is that transparency, especially on the internet, has gone up and down. And I think it's gone a little bit more opaque recently. Jurisdictions like the US and Canada and Western Europe are pretty transparent, up to the point where it infringes on privacy concerns. But then you're thinking about jurisdictions in Asia where it's really hard to get information in China in some degrees. And we have to use specialized techniques to do that, or information from Russian databases, right? Some are transparent, some aren't. And so, when we say this is a public record search, I think a lot of clients are just kind of assuming sometimes that, hey, oh, it's on the internet, everything's on the internet. And to an extent that's true. But, when we're definitely bound by legality and ethics, and so there is a little bit of a limitation now, and we're seeing information being a little harder to get, and we have to find ways around that, whether it's using human sources on the ground, whether it's disguising our IP address with VPNs to access some information in some countries. It's getting harder, and I think that based on the jurisdiction, you have to adjust the scope and your technique. And I think that's a little bit counterintuitive because, growing up, I was always been like, oh, the internet's the world is flat, and the internet's going to uncover all, and everyone's going to be like equal access to information. But that's not true anymore. It's getting a little more difficult, and I think that we're working to kind of work with our clients to educate them of that fact and make sure that they have what they need.
Right, makes sense. Yeah, we've used a tool called Wayback Machine, which allows us to look at historical records of websites, and that's been super helpful sometimes to see if someone totally changes what they're saying, or how many times the team has changed, or different things like that. It's been very helpful. And then on the social media side, in terms of what's publicly available, we've looked before at hiring people, but then or working with someone, and if they're just saying a lot of hateful stuff on social media, or drug or heavy drinking pictures, or just like crazy stuff that's a little bit outside of the normal, why would somebody, like, if someone chooses to do that, why would they want to post publicly? And if their brain doesn't have the ability to perceive or guess what that perception is going to be of any third party in the world, it's not just the fact that they did it, is that they decided it would be a good idea to post that. And it's like a lack of judgment on some level, not knowing that someone's going to see that one day. I'm sure that's something that you guys have seen, or you look at as part of your guys' due diligence process, is like what people are posting to social media. Not only that they did that thing, but maybe that they somehow thought it would be okay to not care what anyone thinks by posting that, right?
Sure, and just we've all seen politicians, athletes, just famous individuals in general over the last couple of years getting scrutinized for a tweet that they posted, 6 years ago or 6 days ago.
Right.
And we actually have a great report. It's our enhanced AI social media scan. So this is all of our reports we're very proud of have multiple teams, tiers of investigators on every single report. This report happens to be a 95% AI technology. And so it actually uses the technology to scan through not just potentially derogatory verbiage, but also, like you mentioned, images. And so just getting a sense of what the individual has put out there into the public sphere, and knowing the type of language they're using that could be potentially derogatory. And it goes through a long list of potentially derogatory terms to look through. But it can be customized as well. If there are some things that maybe your team cares about more than others. To others, in some countries, maybe the use of drugs wouldn't be as big of a deal, but anything with bigotry or bad words, et cetera, this can all be looked for. So it's a great tool and extremely expensive for what it's providing.
Right. I mean, it's one thing if you're Kevin Hart and you're literally a comedian for a living trying to say things that are funny on purpose, but for a normal investment professional or employee, there's some expectation of just being reasonably respectful, even if you're not the most politically correct person on planet Earth. So I'm glad that that's cool that you guys have that type of a tool. The other question I had related to that is I just wonder if it's always best to reveal things up front. Why more people don't get a in-depth due diligence report done on themselves to have in their data room or provide to investors, because we had some former FBI investigators start a private equity fund, and they claimed that their due diligence capabilities was their investment advantage in the marketplace. And they said, well, how can we convey that to potential investors? And I said, well, why don't you do a in-depth due diligence report or have one done by a third party on yourselves? And they said, well, is that normal? Is that standard? And I said, well, no, but the whole point is to show something unique and to be more transparent than normal. But maybe I'm missing something. I mean, is there a reason not to do that? Or do you guys see a lot of people doing that who are raising capital, get the due diligence report done, put it in the data room? Obviously, investors will take it with a grain of salt because you hired some firm that you're claiming is a third party. They might want to go get their own. But if an investor wasn't going to get one, and they know about this third party due diligence firm and know that they're credible and not going to be biased, it could be better than not having one, I would think. But what's your guys' feedback on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen individuals do that sort of preemptively before an investment comes in, or before they're being onboarded on a board of directors or something like that. I think the advantage to that is that you get a comprehensive view of what's in the public records. A disadvantage to it is that what's in public records sometimes won't reflect what to be real. So for instance, there's a lot of litigation records out there, like your traffic records, right? You could say, oh, I got stopped for it was a red light stop, but for whatever reason, the court designated it as a misdemeanor, right? And us as a due diligence firm, all we have are the records that the state keeps. And so what we'd say in the report is there's a misdemeanor, but the charge wasn't identified, right? And they're like, whoa, that's a traffic record. That's not an actual misdemeanor. It's not like public intoxication or something like that.
Right.
And so those are the things that, it's an advantage because it comes up and you'll know that that's what's going to be found, so that you can talk to your partner or potential investor and say, hey, look, I know this is out there and this is what actually happened. And so, it does bring up stuff that people might not be proud of. And we've gotten in situations where, it's not our fault. It's just that's what it is. We didn't put the record into the court. We didn't put it into, one of these specialized databases. It's just there. And also, the negative media coverage that they might not know about, like bad comments on like Better Business Bureau or any sort of like review website. If you're in the service industry, those things are always come out. Those things are always pretty subjective. We don't include those in the report as fact. We just kind of say, hey, there's this many complaints, these have been resolved, and this is generally what the complaints are about. And so there is an advantage to having that. I think that in general, we don't provide advice. I wouldn't say do your own due diligence report and provide that to your counterparty. I would say have it for your own intelligence and the ability that what's out there and what could come up. Every firm is different. They use, somewhat different tools. Their methodology is different, but most of the things that come up that are going to be red flags are going to be found by at least us. I can guarantee. I can't speak for other firms, but they're going to be found, and you'll have a good idea of what is going to be found in public records. But they, like you said, for their own comfort, they should probably have their own, due diligence firm run it, or whatever partner they're working with, because they're going to take it with a grain of salt if you give them a report, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, make sure it makes sense. And maybe there's like an issue or two that could be remedied or addressed. So by the time someone does their own report, you can say, well, this is what happened. Here's how we addressed it. And now it's being fixed, or it's been addressed, et cetera. Okay. And then what is the most costly mistake that you see investors or investment firms make during a due diligence process?
I think we just touched on it. It's sort of not being truthful and not disclosing things that should be disclosed. And all that stuff just kind of leads to concerns about people's ethics and trustworthiness, right? And so, we've had situations where someone had a recent, a person might have had a recent DUI, but since they disclosed it to the bank was like, okay, we knew about that. Or, if it was something kind of, hey, I just got hit with a FINRA arbitration. And they're like, okay, well, you disclosed it. It's always better if you disclose it rather than the third party kind of finding out and then your counterparty getting surprised. And I think that's probably the biggest mistake I see when this happens, is that people I think assume that they're not going to find something, but if you look, there's a way to find it. So be truthful, disclose. I think that's the way to go.
Right. And what could a CEO of a company or an investment firm principal do to prepare for investor due diligence that almost nobody does that would be impactful and meaningful? So obviously your last answer is think about what would be a black mark that would come up and make sure you disclose those up front. That's obviously one way to prepare. Is there something else that should be done to prepare for investor due diligence?
I think, that's the biggest one. I think it's also having all the information ready to go, right? Have it in a package that you can just hit send, so that when you're making those disclosures, when you're making sort of the information available about your executives and your business and everything that you need to do, just have it ready to go, because you don't want the last thing that we want as a firm is to be the bump in the road that holds up a transaction. We don't want to be that at all. We don't want to be the hindrance. And so from that perspective, I think having that information ready to go, having it, packaged neatly for your counterparty to take a look at, because a lot of times they pass that information on to us to kind of verify or look into. And so, the more questions we have in terms of, hey, this person's not showing up, his name is John Smith, we need more information on him to kind of identify him and see, where he is and where he lives and things like that. Just having that ready to go, because without that, it turns a relatively simple process into a really arduous one. And due diligence from our perspective should not be a thing that holds up your transaction.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that answer, because for those of you that are watching this as part of our workshop, you heard at the beginning of the day, we talked about one of the biggest mistakes is having a slow response time to simple due diligence questions, having very weak one-line answers that aren't really helpful and transparent. We also talk about later in the workshop, a master due diligence questionnaire. So instead of answering 10 of these different things, have one that's very thorough and is probably answering any question that's going to come up with a well-documented, an as-needed compliance officer approved reply or attorney approved reply that cites your sources and looks very thorough. And we also later in the workshop will give you a checklist of about 100 things that you could look for during due diligence. It won't be applicable to every deal, but all of this is related to being ready. So it doesn't take you 5 weeks to reply to a single investor due diligence question. It makes it look like it's your first rodeo, or that it should be your last rodeo. Like, people don't know what's going on when you don't reply forever on a simple question about track record or someone on your team that left or something like that. My last question here for either one of you is, what is a $100,000 insight for investors listening to this interview, or investment firms or CEOs listening, when it comes to due diligence? Maybe something that we haven't touched on yet, or something that took you 1,000 or 10,000 hours to really learn in this space?
Sure. So I can go first here. This might be a little bit more focused towards the commercial real estate CMBS world, but you mentioned what would be a costly mistake earlier. So I guess the two are really tied in here. Raul mentioned that the U.S. public records are pretty much as comprehensive as it gets. But some of our partners have given us a shot after they've already been burned, right? After it's something's happened and something was missed by one of the quickie checks they do with an online provider. And so a lot of people don't know that 30% of the counties in the US don't actually have their information available on databases that these quickie checks pull from, right? When you put in a name, John Smith, and you send it off, you get a report back 2 hours later. That's honestly a bit of a mess, 100, 200 pages long. That's a whole new project to go through, but it's also tough because none of that information has been vetted by a real investigator. Like I mentioned before, each one of our reports has 3 teams of investigators on it, vetting the information. Obviously, quality control is key, and turnaround speed is everything, but it doesn't make sense to get a report back in 2 hours where, the information on your John Smith might be a different John Smith, or might be missing some information that pertains to your subject of interest. So I would say don't wait until you've been burned. Like I mentioned before, there are a very wide array of offerings that can fit your solution, fit your budget, fit your specific needs. And we're happy to work with you on that, if you choose to come our way. But just the attorney fees, the headache, the sunk costs, if something does go south and, you didn't know that your John Adams was extremely litigious, like you mentioned before, and you end up in a 6-12 month litigation dispute, and that's going to cost you a lot more than any background check will. I can guarantee that. So yeah, it's good to know. They're around, I think, 50,000 John Adams in the U.S. We'll make sure we're getting yours under under the right scope.
Wow. Yeah. I think many times, wasting time on long phone calls with someone who isn't who they say they are, and making sure someone who says they're worth $100 million. Like one time we found out there was someone living in a trailer park and they'd been just a little bit secretive about some things. So we asked some pointed questions and then everything unraveled very quickly. And I think for some people here who value their time, it's just as much as their money, if not more. Before you book a plane ticket to go somewhere where you're going to spend a half day of your life negotiating something, it might be worth, doing a at least basic level due diligence check just to make sure that someone is who they're saying they are, just to guard your time, hopefully long before you get into something, litigious. But yeah, that sounds like a great insight to leave people with. Rafa, do you have anything else? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, especially because over the last year, and hopefully it isn't the case moving forward, but you haven't been able to get on those plane rides and sit down with the whole management team necessarily. That's unfortunately not been the case recently. So making sure that your John Adams is who he says he is. It could also be very important to find out if John Adams, who I always say John Adams, great character. Jay Adams, former alias, not the best individual. So just finding out what's behind door number 2 is also very important.
Right. I imagine so. Yeah. Rahul, any last comments from yourself?
Sure. Yeah. And I think Eli's comment about ROI is really on point. The relative cost of due diligence is going to save you a lot of money in the long run. It's going to be able to give you the confidence to do the deals that are going to make the most money for you in the long run as well. I think my last kind of comment would be, a lot of times the output in our product really depends on the input and what relationship you have with your provider. And I think we make sure that when we're onboarding clients and talking to them, before signing on with us, what is the most common use case for your business? Because we like to take all our clients' use cases into consideration when providing them with reports, because we don't want these to be just kind of printed out factory reports. We want them to be tailored as much as possible to the specific need. So if you're looking at IPOs, if you're looking at M&As, if you're looking at simple real estate or employment transactions, we want to get you the most relevant product, so that the money that you're putting into the due diligence process is actually producing a product that's worth your time and effort. And so that we are also providing you what you need, and not wasting your time. We don't need to get on a phone call with you every day so you're talking to us more than you're talking to your family. That's not the type of business we are. We do want to consult with you, but but we also understand that, you need something sometimes quick and sometimes fast, and low cost, and we want to know your use case as much as possible so that we're giving you that most relevant product.
Right. Otherwise, it's garbage in, garbage out, or it's just going to be messy if you don't provide the right framework and expectation up front. I'm sure most firms and investment companies have some projects that require a super in-depth report, and some just need a cursory top level just to de-risk their time a bit, or for an internship over the summer, like you said, something like that. It's pretty low level. Great. Well, I appreciate both of you spending your time here today. Just so everyone knows who's listening to this, if you'd like to connect with Eli and Rahul, we're looking to use them for some of our own due diligence on investments that we're working to close right now, and also looking to see how we could be connecting them with Family Office Club members more fluidly through our 20 live events a year and this due diligence workshop if you're listening live now. So if you would like to connect with either of them and use their team's expertise for something that you're needing to conduct due diligence on right now, if you're raising capital and you want to see what's in the public records on your own firm, or use a report like that in your capital raising process, et cetera, or if you're a private investor that would like to leverage their team, just reach out to me directly, richard@familyoffices.com, and I can help get you connected right away. And appreciate your time here today, Eli and Rahul. I think that it's going to be super helpful to 1,000+ people that listen to this over the next month or two. So appreciate your time here today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Thanks a lot, Richard. Great to be here.
Take care.